Hello and welcome to the Fundamentals of Lute Playing. My name is Laudon Schuett, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how to practice. This can be thought of as sort of a companion episode to the one before it. If you've seen that already, you know we're working on our very first lute pieces. I think I talked about some practice strategies in that. This is going to be a discussion of maybe some on a little more of a broad scale. How do we go about practicing? And I think that this is a topic that can be very, very helpful, especially if students get in on it early and can make the best use of their time. Now, I might say some things that are a little controversial in this episode, and maybe they're a little different than what your teachers are saying, or maybe they're a little different than what you found works for you. My overall belief is that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all way of doing something. So if you found something that works really well for you and you can honestly say, hey, this works for me, then who am I to argue with that? You found something that works for you. And as long as it is genuinely working for you and it's not hindering you, I think that's great. So just understand that. I'm not trying to sort of say that my way is the only way. But I am going to give some advice. I've taught for 20 years at this point, and played for 27 on guitar and lute. So just some things that maybe will help you save some time. So the first thing, I think, which is a good overall concept, and I think one that I discussed a little bit in the previous episode, is that we should emphasize working on the things that we're not good at, the things that we want to be better at. So when you open your lute case in the morning and you take your lute out, once you're tuned up and warmed up, we'll talk a little bit about warm-ups here at the end of the episode as well and what that means. But once you're warmed up, I recommend thinking about what is the thing that's holding you back the most. Now that might be something really, really specific. For example, in the previous episode we talked about maybe you're a beginner and you need to be able to get that fourth finger comfortably into the fifth fret, and maybe that is your goal for the day. If you're a more advanced player, maybe what you're working on is getting a chord getting really smooth. You're just trying to get a movement to be very clean and smooth, something that you're having trouble with that is bothering you. It could be something that's specific. So what I would do is, instead of playing the stuff that you're already good at, that you know how to do, I would, after being warmed up, I'd immediately get to work on that which is holding you back. And the reason I think you want to start as soon as possible working on the thing that is impeding you is that we all have kind of a fuel tank. And this fuel tank starts to deplete as you play and you work. And I think we've all noticed this, you know, if I'm sitting and I'm playing and I'm working on... After a while, if I'm doing this over and over, oh, what do I want for dinner? Oh wait, I gotta go pick up my son from daycare. And you start to wander and you start to think about other things. So when you're fresh and you're energized and you're focused, and you're like, okay, I need to fix this. I want this to be a little cleaner. What am I doing wrong? Am I being very precise? That's the time to work on the thing that is causing you problems. And I think that's something to keep in mind. If you have a huge fuel tank and you really can concentrate, then maybe it's less important. But I found most people start to lose that fuel as they go. And the thing that you're working on could be as specific as that. It could be a moment in a piece, a single movement. Or it could be that you've learned your piece, but you get nervous playing it in front of people. Now, I'm a nervous performer. I always have to get a couple concerts in to a tour, and then I feel great after that. So maybe the first 2 concerts out of 6, I'll be a little bit nervous and all of that. By the 3rd or 4th concert, I'm like, this is great. Let's go do this. So one of the things that I'll do is warm up, and then I'll try to make myself nervous at home. So it could be something broad like that. Maybe that's the thing that's holding you back, is that you're nervous. You've got all the technical stuff worked out. Maybe it's a skill. Maybe for you, you're like, oh, my sight reading really sucks. I can't sight read. So what you do is you warm up and you say, I'm going to try to read through half of a Noisy-Edler book today. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it. I'm going to really, really focus. And we'll talk about sight reading down the road. I think I have some tips on sight reading that might help. It's one of the few areas that I feel like I kind of came to me naturally. Everything else I've had to work very, very hard for. But I think you just need to make a list, and your little practice log can be helpful. We do need to be honest about how we learn things. Lots of people mention these practice logs and stuff. I'm not always the best at keeping a practice log, to be honest. But what I do is I keep this near me in case I get distracted, and I might write down something like, remember to buy eggs at the supermarket. And then that way I don't have to think about it while I'm practicing or something like that. But you can also use a practice log to maybe keep track of the top 3 or 5 things that you feel are holding you back. And generally, if you're thinking about, well, what is really holding me back? It's either the thing that your teacher complains about every week. Is your teacher saying, you need to be able to count when you play? And you're going, yeah, I'll work on that. That might be something to focus on. I know that when I was younger, I have lots of regrets. I think I could have been a better student. And sometimes my teachers would say things like, oh, I'd really like you to work on this. But I was worried about something else. And I didn't listen as closely as I could have. So if you have a teacher, I would really take note of what they're telling you to work on and make that a priority. If you don't have a teacher, or maybe you're done with teachers and you're done with school and all of that, I would make a list. I'd sit down, I'd make a list. What are the things that are holding you back? Is it a little technical moment? Is it something broad, like your sight reading skills? Is it your nerves? And I would wake up tomorrow, I'd warm up, and I would start with that. Now, people talk about this a lot. This idea, you'll hear the phrase deep end practice, where you jump into the deep end of the pool, and that's where you start and you get it done. I'm going to add something to it, though. I think for you to get the most out of it, try to find a way to enjoy it. And that can be really, really hard. The example of counting is a lot of students hate counting when they're playing. And they kind of go 1 and 2 and they just want to be able to play without counting, and their teacher asks them to do it. But what I would say is that if it's something that's going to make you a better musician, and it's something that other people agree, like your teacher, they think that's going to make you a better musician, instead of fighting it, I would try to find the joy in it. So just kind of sit there and go, well, okay, this is going to help. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and embrace it. Knowing that maybe it's not the thing right now that you really want to do, but that it's going to help you if you can find the joy in doing that thing. And I think you learn it faster too when you enjoy it, if you kind of make it into a game. For me, it was maybe singing that was a little scary at first, doing that. Counting out loud, certainly when I was younger, was something I didn't like doing. But those are some common ones for students to sort of work on. A technical spot that's really scary, if I have, a run, I'll do this in slow motion, but if I have a run, let's say, and I need to get that pinky down, and that's really hard. Instead of grinning and going, oh, this is hard, I don't want to do this, you sort of, it's like a jump. You're just getting into that. You're making it fun, and you're treating it like a puzzle. I mentioned this a little bit in the previous episode. Set yourself up for success. Have your hot cocoa or your coffee next to you. Look at it like a Sudoku puzzle or a chess problem, and just enjoy the process. Go slowly and reflect. And I think the other thing is take breaks. People don't take breaks enough. So if I'm playing a little passage like that, if I'm going sort of, and I need to get that pinky there, And I do it a couple times. I might just take a moment to go, okay, so what I need to work on is making sure that that pinky isn't flying out and that it's closer to where it needs to be. And then I just take a moment and I come back to it, right? And I set up a little bit better. And I do that over and over and over again. But I try not to get stressed about making mistakes. I try not to get too stressed about this thing that's getting in the way of what I want, which is to play really, really well. So then your next question might be, okay, so I start off with these really hard things, but what about all this other stuff that I've got worked out? I mean, I need to maintain it. I've actually found that once you have something worked out really well, you don't actually need to do much to maintain it. And in fact, the amount of maintenance you need to do will decrease the longer you play it. So if it's a piece that you've been playing for a couple years, you may not need to play it every day. You may not need to play it. You may have to do it once a week, and it's fine. So there's a sort of algorithm or a linear sort of graph that the longer you've played something well, the less time you need to spend rehashing it to keep it sounding good. So if you've got material that's easy now and feels good, deal with your difficult stuff first. And then as you start to lose some of your high energy, your fuel, review the stuff that you've already worked out. And you can do that all in one day. You can begin your day with the hard stuff, and as you get tired, start working on just reviewing the easier stuff. Or you can split it between days. You can say, hey, Monday I'm going to work on really hard stuff, and then on Tuesday I'm going to just review the easy stuff that I already know. I think you need to find what works for you in terms of that scheduling. So I think those are kind of the big concepts that I want to get across. I would not, despite the fact that there are a lot of really fantastic musicians who will sit down and they will play through 80 scales and arpeggios, and they've done the same thing every day since they were kids, and an hour later then they start working on the problem. Some people can do that, but I would say overall that you're going to progress faster if you can hone in on those problem spots sooner when you have high energy. And I would maybe argue that those people have achieved what they have in spite of doing those repetitions, that maybe they have big fuel tanks and they've got enough left over when they go. Now, that kind of gets us into warming up. Warming up is a very controversial topic amongst a lot of people. Some people think warming up is absolutely essential. Some people think that you shouldn't have to warm up. You should be able to just sit down with your instrument and play. I, like in many things, I tend to take a middle road, and I think you have to be honest with yourself and figure out what works for you. That said, what I will say, particularly if you're a professional or you're intending to be a professional, I can think of many situations where I didn't get the opportunity to warm up. Radio shows where they talk to you for an hour and then suddenly they say, oh yeah, can you play us an example? And you're going, oh, you maybe have enough time to go, I'm in tune. And then you're playing. And that's it. Like, even that, what I just did for you right now, takes a little more concentration because I was just talking to you, I was in a different mode, and then suddenly I had to pull my lute up and just go. If you're intending to be a professional, that might be a good thing to work on. I will say that in the classical music world, there is an importance given to warm-ups that I don't necessarily see in other genres of music. I see jazz players and flamenco players. They just pick their guitars up and they just play. They sound great. And so I wonder if in the classical world we haven't gotten a little bit obsessed with the warm-up. And I would take some time to think about how much of a warm-up you need and what that involves. Now, if you do warm up, and you find that that's something you need, I recommend warming up with music. I mean, that might be a little controversial too. Some people might say, oh, you need to warm up with finger exercises or something. At least for me, if I warm up with finger exercises, especially ones that I've been playing for ages, and if you're working on a completely new exercise in a warm up, that sort of defeats the purpose of warming up, right? It should be something you're familiar with, because you're not trying to challenge yourself. You're just trying to warm up. I think the issue I've found with sort of warming up with exercises is that even when I warm up with exercises, I then need to warm up musically anyways. So what I might recommend, if you do find that you benefit from warming up, maybe find a couple of passages from the music you're playing, a couple of easy passages from the music, and warm up with music. Warm up you could sing, you could play, right now we're working on single lines. You could warm up playing just a single voice. Before you add in the other voices. You could warm up while you tune. I mean, this is something that this is the way I sort of warm up. I pretend that I'm checking my tuning, but I'm also plucking the strings, sort of feeling the instrument, and then I'm going. The other thing that helps sort of reduce the amount of warm up you need, which I don't think is talked about enough, is when your fundamental technique, when your technique is good, when you've worked out what works for your right hand and what works for your left hand, it's a lot easier to just kind of go. And then the other element is the mental element, which is sort of setting yourself up in your mind, like, what are you thinking about before you start to play? Now, if I'm thinking about taking the trash out, I might mess up immediately. But if I get into the mindset of before I play, I get into a kind of a quiet place and I think about the notes I'm about to play. And then I start playing. And I just go. So that can be very helpful. There is also physically warming up. Sometimes it's just cold. We in Nashville had some snow and things got quite cold here. I do find that the instrument, it's nice when it's been sitting near your body in those temperatures. So there is a point where like you're just physically cold. And what I would recommend doing is if you're going to play in front of somebody, or if you're a professional and you're giving an interview, just hold the instrument the whole time. Just hold it, keep it nice and warm, and keep it close, and then that way it's kind of ready to go. So there's some advice with that. But again, what I would say is, if I were to just do some bullet points, if you're going to warm up, I recommend warming up with music. Exercises are wonderful. I don't have a problem with exercises. We'll talk about exercises down the road. But for me, they serve a particular purpose. They are to solve a problem. You should be really focused on them, and you should be thinking about them. And I think that the warm-up is more about getting ready to do that. So it should be something maybe a little more familiar before you dive into those sort of things. I also think exercises, once you've solved the problem, you should just get rid of the exercise, move on to a different one. Because if you play every single exercise that you've ever learned, you're going to be spending hours every day just playing exercises. And as early music people, we need to be reading, we need to be listening to music, we need to be learning to dance. We don't have time to be sitting there and doing all of that. There will be periods in your learning where you need to spend some time playing lots of exercises. And I think every professional I know has. I certainly have. I mean, I think there's something like 6 months to a year that I spent a lot. I know Bach did that with his students. He'd force them to do about a year of exercises, and then he'd move them onto music. So I think it's not about whether exercises are good or bad. It's about when we drop them. So some takeaways from this whole episode, just to summarize. Figure out over the next few weeks, what is your ideal warm-up on a perfect day, and experiment with reducing that so that maybe you're a little more resilient. Then I would also try starting off after you've warmed up or not warmed up. Now I say not warm up. When I sit down with the instrument, my warm up is in my head. there is a warm-up process. But after your warm-up is done, I would start with the nastiest thing that's driving you nuts. Maybe it's the physical thing, maybe it's that, and I'd be really treat it like a problem, a puzzle that needs to be solved. Don't bang your head against the wall. Be as relaxed as you can, but try to solve that problem. Sit down and solve it. And then when you start to feel tired, either take some mini breaks and get back at it, or switch over to things that are easier, sort of maintenance stuff. You can reward yourself with that. Just descend down the list of difficulties. And I should say that everyone should be absolutely fine with having a fun day. You know, it's really, really important. You know, sometimes I might decide, you know, I just want to spend a day sight reading or playing some pieces that I really like or goofing around and all of that. Take days to do that. Take a day off completely. I mean, I think people underestimate the power of taking a break. So when we talk about good practice, what we're talking about is for those days where you want to optimize your time and when you want to really hone in and improve. But you could always have fun days. You can always screw around. But just make sure that you sort of decide what mode you're going to be in. Say, okay, today is going to be a fun day. Well, put this away, put the other stuff away, have some fun. But if you're going, well, I want to improve today, then just think about what I've talked about here and experiment with that. Now, if you're already a very experienced musician and you have a completely different way of doing things and you don't want to change that, awesome. That's great. I'm glad it's working for you. And you know, maybe there were some things in this video to think about and to experiment with. Maybe you're a really experienced performer, but you've had trouble playing Prism concerts or concerts where you have to go from not playing to suddenly playing. And you go, okay, well, maybe what I can take away from this video is to try playing every once in a while without warming up so that I have that in my toolkit. So I hope you all get something out of this, and I will have a future episode on sort of breaking down some good ways of learning a new piece so that we can kind of add that to our practice hygiene. Next week, I'm going to cover ornaments, basic ornaments for the Renaissance lute, so we can talk about how to add those into our pieces. So have fun practicing. I hope you're enjoying the pieces, and happy looting. If you're enjoying this, remember the easiest way to support me is to just subscribe. It also keeps you up to date on new episodes coming out. Happy looting, and I'll see you in the next episode for ornaments.